Hello, and welcome back to the Champagne Rugby Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Joe Gray. Joe, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thank you for having me.
No worries, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. So, for the listeners that are out there that aren't familiar with Joe Gray, can you just give us a bit of a background on who you are, what you do, and what you're doing currently?
Yep. Joe Gray was a hooker, mainly known for playing at Harlequins. I had a 16-year professional career. I started at Northampton Saints from sort of 17, 18, where I got picked up in the academy there, and then had several years at Northampton Saints. And I went over to Harlequins when Conor O'Shea came in. And I had a good stint of 8 years at Harlequins. Then I went over to Saracens for 2 years. And then I came back to Harlequins for my last 2 years. So really enjoyed my rugby career. Been really fortunate to play for some incredible clubs, and then I was lucky enough to be in the England mix for 3 or 4 years, and I got a cap against New Zealand at Eden Park. So a little bit on me, and then I've also set up my own business with my partner Lottie. It's about 3 years old now, called Maya Master, which is a sports recovery business. And I've been a passionate coach throughout my career, and I also do coaching now as well.
So you've got quite a full-on rugby CV there. How did you kind of get into rugby in the first place, and what kind of got you into Harlequins from Northampton?
Yeah, so I started at age 8, like fell in love with the game, went and watched my brother. So I'm from Nottingham, played for Nottingham Club through the age of 8, through the minis and juniors till I was 17. Didn't play rugby at school, just totally club. Went to comprehensive school that didn't play, but absolutely loved it, fell in love with the game. Was lucky enough to get through some trial systems, and I managed to do England under 16s representative. Then I played England 18s while I was 16, but I didn't have a club. And I was at camp, and they were basically like, "Oh, you're all associated with Leicester Tigers or Harlequins or all these different clubs. So when you go back to your clubs," and I put my hand up and said, "I'm with nobody. Already played age group, played a year young." And they were like, "Oh, you should have been picked up," but I hadn't. So my dad was really proactive, and he went out at the time. The internet wasn't incredibly resourceful, so he went out and bought a book with all the clubs on. We wrote a rugby CV, handwritten, and sent it out to all 12 Premiership clubs at the time. I got 2 trials, one at Northampton Saints and one at Harlequins, and got offered a contract from both. But I was from Nottingham, and the Saints contract was just closer to home for basically the same. So I could commute a bit early on, and then I moved down there. So that was sort of the start of me getting into rugby. And then, I was lucky enough to sort of live out my boyhood dream of becoming a professional rugby player.
So at the time, was Saints in the Premiership, or were they? So that was your first Prem club, was with the Saints.
Yep. So I joined in the era of Carlos Spencer, Mark Robinson, Bruce O'Hana, Steve Thompson, Ben Cohen, like a ridiculous team. So that was my first year. But I was throughout my career plagued with injury, hence why I set up a sports recovery company. But I basically got offered my professional contract on a Thursday, best day of my life. Passed my driving test, drove to Northampton. I'd been on trial, got offered a pro contract. They're writing up over the weekend. They'd send it me Monday to sign. On the Saturday, I played in a cup match and had an horrific knee injury where my foot was under my armpit, dislocated my knee. So I did everything you could possibly do in your knee, like all 4 ligaments, meniscus, cartilage, the works. Almost got it amputated because the artery had bent round fully with my shin and everything that went under my arm. So it was a horrific one. I was in hospital for about 5 weeks, on crutches for about 7 months, learning to walk again. Was lucky enough that on the NHS I had a really good surgeon that managed to fix it all correctly, and I was out for about 20 months. And then I managed to get back, and my season back was basically when Saints dropped down to the champ. So I actually played a lot of rugby as well behind Dylan Hartley. So that was sort of me getting back into it. But yeah, I was lucky to come back from an horrific start.
Damn. So you were then playing a bit of Championship rugby, and then did you guys get promoted again back into the
Yeah,
Premiership as well that
yeah. So
season?
we went. I'm pretty sure we went undefeated in all comps. So we went through and got back promoted. Then I played in the Prem for the following season or so behind Dylan. But I did basically, I had a year of no contracts. I was coaching a school to get paid so that I could rehab and stay around Saints. Then I had a year in the academy. Then I had 2 years first team at Northampton Saints. And then I realised I was behind Dylan, and I was getting 10, 15 minutes off the bench each week.
Yeah.
And I was 20, 19, 20, and I wanted to progress and be as good as I could. So I started to look around different clubs. And Connor had seen me play for England 20s he'd basically seen me in like an unbelievable match. I played unbelievably well, so he spotted me in that game. Had a meeting when he took over at Quins, and he said, "I think you'd fit into what we're trying to do here." So I moved, and after the first few months, so it was October time, so about 6 weeks to start the season, I managed to fight my way in, and then I started 29 games that season. We won the Challenge Cup, and the following season we won the Premiership.
Yeah.
And it was a move for me to come down to London, experience how Quins do it, and it was totally different to what I'd been doing at Saints, where it was Dorian West, real old school Leicester. We're going to fight, and we're going to do topless mauling. And I mean, I'm a bit of a comedian. I can do a bit of all of it, so I could do it, but it wasn't my natural way of playing. Whereas then I went to Quins, and all of a sudden it was like forwards over here, and I was like, oh god, topless mauling and a bit of scrapping, and then we were practicing offloading as we fall to the floor and how we're going to hang it up out the backhand for the wingers to come onto. And I was like, wow, this is a different world. So
Yeah. We've had a few of the Quins boys on from that period. So we had Nick Evans, we had Hugo Monnier. It's that whole period was like the golden era for a lot of the boys, especially like you said, winning the Premiership, winning the Challenge Cup as well. Like that was a really good team, and I imagine you had quite a few nice, good memories of a lot of those boys.
Unbelievable memories. And I mean, the 2011 was incredible because we came together. We were all quite young, so I was one of the younger ones, but like Chris Robshaw's a year or two above, Danny Kerr, like we were all similar age. So we were all in that age where we loved our rugby, but also enjoyed a night out. So when we had good wins, we had a hell of a night out to celebrate them as well. And actually, 2012, when we won the Prem, I think we still hold the record. It was the most games undefeated in a row. I think we're at 14 in all comps. So if you imagine a quite young squad who work really hard in the week, and then you go 14 unbeaten, it's pretty much 14 nights out every week for a chunk. And it was that was an unbelievable season. That is up there with my best rugby memories ever. Doing that season, being the first Quins team to get through to a final, do the walk over to Twickenham, and then to win the final against the favourites Leicester. With that squad and that group, we were together for a long time. Yeah, it's incredible. We still do reunions now, and we have a 2012 WhatsApp group, and it's just a great group. So.
Oh man, it sounds legendary. I love to hear all of the sort of. Is there any sort of stories that you can share from that golden period?
Probably not for a podcast, but there was a lot of good memories, a lot of good times. We had some incredible wins along the way. So we beat Toulouse away and broke their record. I think that 48 wins at home or something incredible. And then we went to Munster and beat them in Thomond Park the season before, which was they hadn't been beaten in 10 years, only once before by Tigers in Europe. So we had some incredible wins that were sort of against the odds for the group we were. But I just say about that group, like on and off the pitch was incredible. But the reason it was incredible was definitely culture led from Conor O'Shea. And we weren't the best team in the world on paper, but if someone missed a tackle, someone would have covered their arse and go and get it. So that actual tight knit squad was incredibly strong in that period. And I have to say, all the successful teams I've been in, it's been down to a culture with some unbelievable players. Don't get me wrong, Nick Evans, Danny Kerr, unbelievable. Chris Robshaw, they're amazing players. But the culture that you build and them bonds you get really go a long way.
How did your time at Northampton differ from when you were at Harlequins?
So I definitely went into Northampton. I went into Northampton basically when I was injured, and Rob Hunter and Ali Heifer, the two Exeter coaches, were my academy coaches, and they were unbelievable. Supported me through my knee injury, got me into the club as soon as I was out of the NHS care, and looked after me. So I was in debt to them. They were incredible coaches. But also in that period, Jim Mallender and Dorian West came in as the two coaches. And as I said, it was a bit more of an older school approach and a bit of Leicester, especially in the forwards. And Dorian West and myself didn't see the best eye to eye in the style I played. So it was a little bit different. And I was also always seen as a young academy player. So I was the young academy lad, Joe was the young academy lad. So I only realised that really when I moved. Even though I've been in the first team for a couple of years at Saints, I'm still seen as young Greys of the ACAD. So when I moved, and all of a sudden that tag of being an ACAD player, that's why I'm not playing because I'm young, all of a sudden disappeared, and I played a load of rugby. Started, even though I was 21, started every week in the Prem and played a load of huge games. And age all of a sudden disappeared because I didn't have that academy tag. So I'd say that was a massive differentiator in it. So
yeah, and then you obviously, when you are moving into Harlequins, like you said, you've got that club culture that it was just unbelievable at the time. When you were injured, though, kind of talk us through that experience. 20 months out of the game and not being able to do much. That must, at a young age as well, of like 20 years old, that must have been really difficult.
17. So
17.
17 when it happened.
Yeah.
So it was yeah, it was tough. I mean, when I went into the hospital and saw all the specialists, and then they saw all the scans and they'd seen my leg, how it was, and they were like, "You're not going to be playing sport again, and you're probably not going to run again if we can save the leg," was pretty shocking to hear when you've just been offered a pro contract which you've worked for since you were 9 or 10. But I'd definitely say one thing I've always had is a real high work ethic and a real strong resilience to sort of issues. So after the initial shock of it, I just said they don't actually know who I am or what I can do. I fought against odds to find myself a contract and play at these different levels when I've not had the easiest route to it. So I just took it as a huge challenge. So firstly, they said, "Oh, you'll walk with a limp and you'll struggle to ever run again." So then first thing I was doing was I was in the physio every day in the hospital for 8 months, learning to walk again without a limp, and then learning to strengthen it. And then once I got out of there, I was straight to Saints and learning to build up to be able to run again. Then once I could run, I could join in with certain bits and change the direction. And it was just always ticking off a little hurdle at a time to then get me back to this major point. And the main thing that was really tough was they did a strength test on like both your quads and hamstrings on basically a leg curl, but it's computerized. And they said you need it within 5% of your good leg to be able to play rugby again. That's what we'll give you. If you ever get to that, then you can do it. So I had to test that. And the first time I tested it after about a year, it was like 400% weaker. And I had to get within 5%. And I was just like, wow, this is a this is a bit of a shock. But yeah, worked really hard to get it within that. And as soon as I did, then I played a bit of a sketchy first game where I was a bit nervous. The psychological side, probably more worried about doing it again. But once I got that first game under my belt, then all of a sudden I was in and started playing regularly, and it just, the thought of it disappeared, and you move on. So
What advice would you have for players that kind of do go through injury and have had like a life changing sort of injury occur to them? And what would you say to these young lads and lasses that are playing rugby?
I definitely say it's up to you what you want to do. So doctors can give you their advice, and the doctors told me I wouldn't play, and it'd be stupid to play again. But I didn't. I wanted to play. That was ultimately all I wanted to do. But some people out there, if they have a major injury like that, will be like, I don't want to risk that again. I don't want to go through this again. I'm lucky to be able to walk or run. So it definitely depends what you deep down want to do. But also remember, they're just human beings. So the doctor's just a doctor giving you his advice, and that's exactly what it is, advice. So once I started building strength, I was totally aware that I'd get back and play rugby, and I didn't expect anything else of myself. So just give yourself smaller targets. If I'd have gone from day one, I'm going to play rugby in 9 months' time, it's an unrealistic target. So what I said was I need to get walking again. I need to walk without a limp and without crutches. Then I need to build some strength into it so that I can get running. And when I'm running, I can start to build in some curve runs and change direction. Then once I've done that, I can build more strength to get into some landing and contact. And I had probably 6-week windows of what I was doing. And then when you do that, it breaks down and becomes more achievable than just the end goal of I need to play rugby again. So definitely make smaller goals to reach that massive goal at the end.
I can see you're clearly a very mind strong person that is very driven and determined. And I can imagine there's quite a lot that you've picked up along the way in terms of having the right mindset and being able to tackle problems with consistency and stoicism in a way. What are some little things that you do that you think some like other young rugby players could implement to get that mental fortitude in the day-to-day?
A huge one for me was like self-talk. So I was terrible when I was young. Like if it started raining the day before a game as a hooker, I'd be terrified if I threw poorly. What would the game be like? Would I cost us the win? Would coaches think I'm rubbish? All this stuff that I'd start to picture in my head the night before, and then I'd sleep awful before a game. And then I go out and play, and it'd never be as bad as I think it was. Or I play quite well, but I basically managed to teach myself, especially after the knee injury I had. I was lucky. In the bed next to me in the NHS was a psychologist, so I met him a few times when we got out of hospital, and he went through a few like picture scenarios of picturing the incident and then like breaking it down in your head to it just an image rather than the whole thing where you're picturing it and your heart rate flies up and it's terrifying. So I was quite lucky to meet him quite early on. But then the self-talk piece was huge, that every time I'd have a negative thought of something, I'd just quickly change it in my mind to something positive that I could do in that game. So I'm going to make a massive tackle and I'm going to work extremely hard and I'm going to do a nice carry. And I started to just really build in that self-talking imagery around it. And I have to say now that is one of my super strengths. I just try and self-talk to myself positively as much as possible on a daily basis. And I think that really builds up your self-worth and your self-confidence. And even though you'll make mistakes and make errors, that's how you learn, and then ultimately build yourself up to really give yourself the best chance. So a lot of positive self-talk, a lot of positive imagery.
And do you think that you kind of matured mentally quicker than normal people because of that injury that you went through? Or do you think this mental maturity and fortitude came later on? Or was there sort of a certain time when you thought that you had kind of figured it out in a way?
I'd probably say when I turned about 16, I was pretty stubborn anyway as a kid. So when I wanted to do something, I'd learn how to do it. Even if I wasn't very good, I'd practice and practice and practice. And I'd definitely say that's what I did throughout my rugby career. I practiced extremely hard. So for instance, line-out throwing, I wasn't the best line-out thrower. I wasn't the best rugby player, but I worked really hard. And I used to go down the park for an hour every night after school and throw at a lamppost. And I do it every night for an hour. My mates would be like, come to the park, we're going to play football, or come and have a beer. And I'd be like, I've got to throw for an hour, then I'm free and I'll do whatever. But I was quite stubborn in terms of if I wanted to be good at something, I knew it meant I had to practice. And my dad gave me a great bit of advice when I was under 16s England. We got an outrageous training program with every day and every session you had to do. And it was outrageous for like a 4-month period before the games. And I was like, oh, it's way too much. There's loads on this. And my dad just said, like, don't live your life wondering what if. He said, what if you don't do that and you don't make it? Will you regret it? And will you think, what if I'd have actually done that program and gave it a crack? Because he goes, ultimately, if you do the program and you don't make it, at least you did everything they told you to and you gave yourself the best chance. So I did the program every day as it said I would. I threw every day. And I made the squad and I got through. But they actually put their hands up. Like, honestly, who followed the program? It was a big program. And I realized I was the only one that put my hand up that followed it like day to day out of that whole group. And I was like, oh, actually, that's a real advantage if I have this mindset of like, don't live your life wondering what if. So I was very disciplined. I worked really hard to get to where I did. I was called J2O Joe for a long period through my youth till I got to Quins and started winning and playing regularly. Then I started to enjoy them moments. But yeah, J2O Joe was a nickname for a bit.
I can understand why. I can understand why. Was your dad quite a big influence then for you growing up and even today?
Yeah, mum and dad were huge influences. They drove us around. I've got a brother and a sister, and they took us everywhere. They gave us an experience of everything, so music, art, sport. And funnily enough, my sister got first in an arts degree. My brother was an unbelievable musician, and I was a sportsman. But we got exposed to all of it. And I think what they always wanted us to do was find a passion that we enjoyed and we loved. It didn't matter what it was. Mine happened to be rugby. And mum and dad came along for the journey. They came to every game until I was about 30, 29, 30. If it was in France, if it was in Ireland, they'd get the train across, they'd make a weekend of it and they'd book it off work. But they were a huge support. And yeah, my dad was renowned for incredible advice. So he wasn't the best with his own advice, but he was very good at giving it. So he gave me great advice throughout my career at many points.
It's always good to have a solid chap like that in your corner, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, it will be It's been a reflection of your career, and I imagine of your siblings as well, which is always a testament to the parents as well in many ways.
Yeah.
And then you got injured when you were 17, but obviously that wasn't the only injury that you would have experienced
No.
in your career.
So I've had about 15 operations. That was the first. I've had 2 shoulder ops each side. I've had more knee operations. I've had 2 discs in my neck, thumbs and hands, an eye operation. Like, so had quite a lot of stuff throughout my career. But it sadly is part of the game. Even more so as a forward, you're in the physical mix of mauls, scrums, big collisions into big heavy men, much bigger than me. But I do actually think that builds that resilience piece as well, because once you get back from one, then you get another. You actually learn different ways to deal with it and then get back again. And you try and use the time out to make yourself better with skills, whether it be fitness, strength, passing, catching, throwing. And you try and utilize that time to get back, because ultimately it happens to everybody in the sport. It's just trying to maximize your time and hope you don't get as many as I did, but you hope you don't get as many.
I can imagine you've learned quite a bit about the body by now as well.
A lot about the body, a lot.
And then, so from Harlequins, you then got picked up with England, like you said, for a match in Eden Park, 2014. I remember watching that at the time. It was in London, playing along. It was the game when Carl Eastman and Tuolangi were in the centres, and you had Alan Yard on the wing.
Exactly, and lost in the last minute from a pick and go in the corner.
Yeah. Ben Morgan had a really good game that game as well, I remember.
And Freddie Burns played awesome as well and kicked everything. Yeah, it was that was the game. So yeah, I was in the England mix for a few years. So from 2010-11, when I came to Harlequins, at the end of that season, I got into the Saxons and played the Churchill Cup. And then 2012, after the Prem, I played some Saxons throughout that season, went into some England camps, and then I went on the tour to South Africa. And I didn't get capped. I did midweek on cap games again, bars, different things like that. And then the autumn international, I actually got selected to be in the squad, and unfortunately got another injury, and I was out for 8 weeks with a big tear down my abdominal, so I couldn't play for 8 weeks, and it was for the whole period of that tournament. So yeah, sadly didn't get capped. Then David Page got a few more, which was a bit frustrating, but I know lots of people it's happened to. And then carried on plugging away, was in the mix quite a lot, but again struggling to get a cap. And then thankfully went to New Zealand 2014 and played the first test at Eden Park. I managed to come on. My first impact was tackling McCaw. Then it was scrimmaging against Kevin Mialamu, who was like one of my boyhood like idols, and I was like, this is incredible. At Eden Park, watching the Hacker, I was like, if I could have had one, I'm extremely proud that it was that one. So.
What was it like? How did you kind of feel before the game? You like with the Hacker and everything, the tension. Eden Park as well, renowned All Blacks stadium.
Yeah, it was packed as well, and they're all doing the Hacker in the crowd with it, so it was echoing round with fireworks going. It's incredible. It's as you could imagine, like literally ridiculous feeling. I was extremely nervous, but I'd also done quite a lot of uncapped games. There was about 10 or 11 uncapped games, so I'd done quite a lot of being on the edge of it. So I was nervous because I was getting my opportunity finally, but I was also quite confident in my own ability, that I'd been close to it for a long time and really knocking at the door. So I was excited, nervous. As soon as I found out I was involved, I used my match bonus to fly my mum and dad over, and my wife now, Lottie. So they all came over for the week and saw the game, so in the crowd, which was incredibly special. And yeah, I was nervous, but then I got about 20 minutes, got on, and as soon as you're in it, it's just another game, except for the moments you realise, first kickoff, I ran and tackled Richie McCaw, and you're like, wow, that is a cool experience. So
one of the best, greatest players of all time, for sure.
But yeah, no, I had a great tour, really enjoyed it, and yeah, something that will live with me forever.
What's tour like when it's your first England tour? Did you have to do any sort of initiations or anything?
The first one was South Africa, and I had to do, like, you tell a joke and sing a song and all the good stuff you normally do. But I was lucky that both tours had James Haskell on it, who I knew through rugby for many years anyway. But he is a great person to have on a long tour for sort of 4 or 5 weeks, because he's just, you can't shut him up. He's at the front with a microphone telling you stories that you might have heard 3 times, but he is unbelievable at the delivery of them. So he makes it much better. And then, as you can imagine, through your rugby career, you have your Harlequins group, and you have lads you might have played 16s, 18s, 20s with. So Corbazero and Good and different people I played with, Jordan Turner-Hull and them lot throughout my younger years. So then they're on tour, so you're catching up with lads you've known for a long time. So it's just a really great environment, and everyone's extremely excited to be there all together, sort of living out your dream.
I think Hask is probably his first career as an entertainer and his second career as a rugby player.
Yeah, exactly. And he loved showing that whenever he was on tour. He'd grab the mic and take control of all the situations, as you can imagine. Kick the coaches off and have a players bus, and then just destroy them when they're on the other bus. So he's very, very funny. I
can imagine. Yeah, I imagine he was a good lad to have around, and even on that New Zealand tour as well, that you've got a good, at that time for England, it was a young bunch of lads. Yeah. With everyone's got the similar goal in mind. And Harlequins was a big part of that team, because you had Rob Shaw, Kerr, Mike Brown, all these boys that kind of were in the golden era of, let's say, the 2012 team. and got
I think
that
there was
experience.
about nine. I think there was about nine selected. So it was like Marla, myself. I think
Yeah.
George Robson was in. There was Rob Shaw. There was Nick Easter, Danny Kerr, Nick Evans, Ugo Monye Brown, George Lowe, Jordan Turner Hall. There was a big collection of us, which also made it awesome because they were my close friends that all of a sudden you're going away with to represent England, which was, yeah, amazing.
Do you still keep in touch with many of the boys? Are they still around sort of the Twickenham, sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
Hampton
So
area?
some have moved back home, so like Ollie Comer back to Bristol, and James Johnson's over in France playing still. So a few moved away, but the majority are still sort of London based, and we always have a sort of catch up once a year at least. We generally do a couple a year where we do a reunion, and most of the lads try and get there if they can, and then it's just like any old rugby reunion, lots of stories, lots of piss taking, and a load of beers. So always good fun.
I can imagine. I can imagine. But you didn't just do all of your career at Harlequins. You took a stint at Saracens. Kind of talk us through that a little bit.
So that's an interesting story as well. So I basically had another injury. So I was playing at Quins, second game of the season, played Gloucester. First play, tackled Hillard, punched his knee, and I thought I'd dislocated my thumb. So it was like pointing the wrong way. So I crunched it back in, ran to line out. As I threw it, popped back out, and I was like crunching it back in again. But it was when Katrikillis, the 10 from South Africa, actually broke his Adam's apple. So all the physios ran on to deal with him, and I'm in the background, my thumb like the opposite direction. So I basically self-strapped it in the corner of the pitch while they were getting the stretchers and stuff. And I played the whole game, and then when I came off, it had broken clean through. So it wasn't dislocated, it was just broken bones swinging in and out. But I managed to get through the game, which was great. But then it was going to be 6 to 8 weeks out, 8 weeks realistically. We got to 5 weeks, and the club, basically the coaches said, we really need you, Grazer. We're playing Wasps in the Heineken Cup. And they've got a good set piece. We need you to play. So would you strap it and play? The specialist said it should be fine. So I said, as I've done many times in my career, yep, I'll strap it up and play. First tackle, I tackle Ashley Johnson, do my thumb again. Had to have it operated on and missed a chunk of the season. And then it was my contract year, and I was talking to quite a lot of clubs about possibly going abroad and different things. And then they just all came back and said, oh, he's very injury prone. He's been out a lot with injury. So I actually finished the season. Even Quins at the time, it was Graham Roundtree who became the coach with John Kingston. Said, "Oh, you've been injury prone this year, so we're going to probably keep the hookers we've got and not keep you on." Even though I'd started every time I was fit, which was really frustrating. But I basically finished the season without a contract. Didn't have a contract, so I was ringing around trying to find clubs with my agent. No one was available. No one was really looking. So I did my own pre-season for about 7 weeks on a park, running at throwing at a rugby post, and then one of my friends just said, why don't you just ring Sarries? You've heard they have an injury to Hooker. So I'd heard that, but they said, oh, we're holding out to see if he's fit. So I just managed to get Mark McCall's number. I'd never spoke to him. And I just gave him a phone call. I said, mate, can I come and train with you for free? I don't need to be paid. I'll just show you what I do. You're missing a hooker anyway, he's injured. So I can just fill his spot in line out training and things. And it'll keep me fit and ready to go. And if you want me, happy days. If you don't, it's done me a solid by keeping me match fit and ready to go for when a club might need me. So he was great. Spoke to coach. He said, yes, come in. You can come and train. We can't pay you, but you can come and do everything Sarries would do. So I went, did 4 weeks, thoroughly enjoyed it. It was an incredible club, like incredible environment. Loved playing, but they couldn't offer me a contract. So I got an injury cover at Saints for 6 weeks, went and did that. And then at the end of the 5th week, I got a call from Sarries saying the injury's happened. He's redone it. He's got to retire, sadly. Do you want him for the rest of the year? So I signed for that year, and about 5 months later, won the double with Sarries playing in the Champions Cup final. And yeah, just an incredible turnaround from 6 months before not having a club and thinking that's the end of the road to winning the double and finishing. Thankfully, my collection of trophies I hadn't won was the Champions Cup, so managed to complete the set, which was incredible. Then I re-signed for another year, and then I came back to Quins after that due to injury issues here.
So for the listeners that aren't aware, Joe is actually the only professional player in history to have won every trophy in the top 2 tiers of English rugby, which includes the European trophies as well. So that is quite the rugby CV to have on your.
Very lucky actually. So I always back down by saying there were lots of good players in their era who won the Champions Cup and Premiership, but not that many that have done the Challenge Cup, the LV Cup, the championship, the BNI. So I've managed to be across a load of teams that have done a lot of incredible stuff. So yeah, I was really proud to do that Champions Cup, because I never thought I'd get that with Saris. And my dad was tearful at the end of that game, and he was the one who actually said it. He said, "No one else has done that. You've just completed the set." So that was incredible.
It's kind of like, you know, when you say, "Oh, FIFA, I've completed it, mate." It's kind of like for Joe, English rugby. Yeah, I've completed it, mate.
Yeah, I got outdone though by Vincent Kopp. So he just won the World Cup and he completed basically everything. So
Oh yeah.
international, won it all, and then done Champions Cup and Premiership that season. And they're like, "You're incredible." He was a joke that season. So yeah,
Uh,
definitely
but
better.
not quite the full English set.
Not the
That's
full English lot, not English in Europe. They're not. No, no, no. That's yeah,
he hasn't got all of them quite yet. But who knows? Maybe he gets relegated. And
yeah,
well,
exactly.
was he with Saracens? Was he?
He was. So there could have been a couple of Saris who did it, but they didn't win the Challenge Cup. They lost in the final.
Ah, that's
Yeah,
a shame. That's a
kept
shame.
it alive. Kept it alive.
Yeah, got to keep that going. But that would probably be one of the only ones where you, because they got relegated for
Yeah,
tax reasons.
yeah.
That
They yeah, they were the only ones. So there were a few in there that would have been in the mixer, and then they yeah, they lost the Challenge Cup. So yeah, didn't have it.
you were in a good position though, because in that 2018 period when you came in, they were in very good form, and you would have been training with a lot of the boys like that were just coming up, like Mario Toge. You had Farrell's hitting a lot of form. Like, kind of, what was that experience like coming in the mixer, having just played 8 years at Harlequins?
Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, there's a really strong rivalry between Quins and Saris, and going in, I was a little bit nervous of how that would be. Like, obviously, it's a huge rivalry. And I went in, and Jackson Ray first day was like the nicest bloke I've ever met. Got me straight in, telling me what the calls were, introducing me to everyone, and straight away I realised just how nice a culture they have there. Like, they work really hard on bringing people in, making them all settle. Will Skelton first day took me under his wing and got chatting and became unbelievably close friends with him. But their squad was just ridiculous, like ridiculous squad. So
Stacked.
yeah, when you saw it and you just started training with it, you realise the standard they trained at, the intensity they trained at. Mako and Billy running at you, it was basically full goo. Like, if you tap their bum, they run through. So you have to chop them and get strapped up for a game each session. But it was short and sharp, but it was intense. And I definitely think it really sort of generated my game and got me playing at a high standard again, because of just the level they operate at. And then luckily for me, the coaches had belief in me towards the back end of the season when it counted.
Yeah.
And set piece was really important against Munster and Leinster and them teams. So gave me the nod over some other unbelievably good players in my position.
Yeah, I mean, you did well. And how do you think all of that experience then has led you to now what you're doing now with starting Mayo, the sports recovery company?
Yeah, so my master sports recovery company actually started in like 2018, 19, the end of that season when I was out with my thumb and I didn't have a contract. I had really bad Achilles tendonitis. So I'd had a special treatment where they basically whack your Achilles called Shockwave, which is really expensive. Had it done and it helped loads. So when I went home, I knew I didn't have it for another week or so. I was actually using a jigsaw and I welded a stool leg and put it on the end of my jigsaw and started using it. And the mechanism was identical to what I just had in a posh clinic. So I started using it, felt incredible, took it into training. As you can imagine, 60 lads, bright yellow jigsaw, loud as anything, destroyed me. Went out, did my running injured, came back and heard it a mile off. And then all the lads were using it. And before I knew it, they're pulling cash out of their wallets. Carl Sinclair was my first customer, bought it off me that day. And then I told about 7 by the end of the week. And that was a little seed of my master, like, oh, there might be something here that we could create to help people sort of self-treat. I was also conscious I didn't have a contract. I wouldn't have physio every day. So I was like, oh, I could use this on my back where I have issues and different things. And then my wife is a businesswoman. So she literally sat down and said, I run marathons, I do CrossFit, I get injured all the time. I don't know any of the stuff you know from 13 years at that point of pro rugby. We should make a company that just educates people on how to look after their bodies better so they can do it for longer, but also some of these tools you get access to and you start to create. So that was sort of the seed of my master. Took about a year or so developing the product and trying to get it to where we wanted it. And then we launched a few years ago, been going about 3 years or so now. And now we're in at Wimbledon currently for the tennis with our recovery partner. We've done like the likes of Premier League football clubs loads. We do England Rugby, we do Team GB, we've got PGA Tour talking currently about recovery. So it's blown up and gone incredibly well. But yeah, it's been really lucky to sort of get that on the side. And then I also coached from the early days. So I coached from when I did my knee. That's when I started coaching. I did it throughout my career. And I was really passionate to always stay in rugby if I can, because I absolutely loved it my whole life. So being in that environment, I wanted to try and stay in if I could.
It's becomes a part of who you are, the sport that you've dedicated your whole life to.
Yeah.
And so you've started MyoMaster for 3 years now.
Yeah, properly.
What's the long-term goal now? So you've gained traction. You're in Wimbledon. You've grown it to an incredible position where it is. With where you're at now, where do you want to be, and what do you think's holding you back from getting there?
So we're at a really exciting stage. So we've grown incredibly well over the last sort of 2-3 years, and we've been really lucky that basically I was a pro athlete, and I basically do product development, and I fully believe that the products we developed are the best in their class on the market, hands down. So where we've been really lucky is that the likes of Premier League football clubs hear about the product, and then they buy it offers, and then that reach hits players, and players buy it offers. Then Wimbledon hear about us, and they want us for the recovery hub and things. So it's scaled really well just through word of mouth. We're now at a point where sales are going really well, and we're starting to grow. We're still only UK based. So I think in the future we'll look to branch out a little bit into some new territories, but also our product offering. We're currently looking into software. We've just been backed by Google, so we just had investment from Google to help with the software element, which will hopefully be a bit of a physio in your pocket that helps you with injury and recovery around your day-to-day exercise. So it's really exciting where we're going. We hope that it grows into the home of sports recovery has been our day one goal. So not only we're not going to just shove you a product and sell you one. That's the last thing you want to do. If a product can help you do what you love for longer, then get it by all means, but also just educational stuff to help you do what you love for longer, whether that's body weight stretching or recovery protocols from ice baths to cool downs to everything. So yeah, the aim is home of sports recovery with the best tech to go alongside it.
Honestly, it sounds incredible. I'm very excited for the company and seeing where it could go.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting stage and really exciting time for us. So yeah, we're loving it at the minute. It's very busy, but busy is always good.
And are you guys going to be involved with the Rugby World Cup at all?
So we've sold into a few countries, so they have our products at the World Cup. So as I mentioned, England, Rugby, and a few other nations have our products, which they have currently. And then I've been lucky enough to get approached a few months ago to help coach the World Cup squad. So England men's, I'm currently doing specialist coaching throwing, so I'm in camp currently helping them prep for the World Cup, which is incredible for my coaching journey as well to go alongside my business. So yeah, it's cool.
How's the preparation looking?
Yeah, good. They're working incredibly hard. They're an unbelievable group. Like the players England have access to is incredible. And I'm very lucky that I'm working with some really exciting hookers. So Jamie George, I played with at Saracens and know how much of a world-class operator he is. He's an incredible talent. But then you have also like the youngsters like Theo Dan, who was actually the first year ACAB when I was at Sarries, and then he's burst on the scene this year, which he's amazing. You've got Jack Walker, who's been at Quins again with myself, who's an incredible player. So there's lots of good hookers that I'm getting to work with. But then you look at the quality of the nines. You've got Danny Kerr back in the mix with Ben Youngs. You've got Owen Farrell, Ford, Marcus Smith. You've got Manu. You've got the back three is just ridiculous. There's like unbelievable from Max Mullins to Caden Murley there's just people everywhere. So I think dwindling down the squad to the amount they need for the World Cup, we've got to lose another 10 is going to be really tough. They're all fighting for every position, but I think it's really exciting. I think the history of English rugby in World Cups is amazing. So there's been a lot of finals. We won it in 2003. We generally do pretty well in World Cups, fingers crossed. And there's been a good chunk of time for Steve to sort of get the lads on page with what he wants to do. So fingers crossed it can be a good World Cup for England.
Do you think he's had enough time to mould into the position as head coach?
I think he's a good head coach. I think having been in the England squad for a long time previously, then experience it at Leicester. And if you actually look at the Leicester time he was there, in the first season, if it wasn't COVID, they would have been relegated. The next season, they won the Premiership.
Yeah.
So if it was a normal season, you would have been in the champ. The following season, they win the Premiership. So it shows that it does take time to implement your game plan to get the squad on page with you. And I'm just hoping he's had long enough pre-World Cup to do that, because the Six Nations was sort of a baptism of fire, get in and you're in the mix straight away. Whereas he's got a bit of time to implement that, and he's an incredible coach. He's got unbelievable detail. He's got a great coaching staff around him. So I'm hopeful he's had enough time, but only time will really tell on that point. And it's a big ask for him. He's came in with short notice to run a squad into the World Cup for the biggest challenge in rugby. So it is a short period of time, but hopefully the chunk before the World Cup is long enough for him to implement what he wants to.
100%. All the best of luck to these guys, because there's a lot of pressure, especially from the media, on the players, but also on the coaches, because a lot of the media kind of blames the different coaches for results, and everyone was like, "Oh, we want the results, but they don't know what the hard work they go through, the boys and the team, and all the back end stuff, like yourself now."
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big one in terms of coaching. Like, it's a weird one because if the team lose or underperform, the coach gets hammered. But if the team win, the coach gets praised, and you sort of understand that as a head coach. And as a coach, when you go into that role, you learn that pretty quick, that it's a performance-based business. But as I said to you earlier in this conversation, I think the most successful teams I've ever been in is the best culture, and culture takes time to build. It's not an overnight thing, so you have to give people time to build the culture, build what they want off the field as much as on it, and then people buy into your plan and your vision. And I have to say, in my career, I think Conor O'Shea's been the best I've ever experienced with it. He came in 2010, 11 with a mindset of we'll live and die by the sword. We're going to play a Quinn's way, and then he went into the history of the club and how they played a flamboyant style back in the day as Harlequins, and had Kiwis come over, and he really built a sort of foundation under how we play. And then he said, we'll play like this, and if we win or lose, that's how we're doing it, and I'll take the blame. And it was a really incredible situation to be in, and it's definitely something I've taken on board, that I'm now head coach of London Scottish, which I'm very fortunate to do alongside everything else in the Championship. And it's something I feel is really important, is to build that culture, build that understanding and that belief in what we're doing as a group.
How do you find time to balance all of this? Head coach of London Scottish, hooker line-out coach for England, running the business with your partner for Mayo. You must be an excellent time manager, or just have a very good personal assistant.
Yeah, very busy. I have to say that the wife Lottie is incredible. She's CEO of My Master. She runs out on a day to day, and I help where needed. But she's definitely got the reins on the business, and she's an incredible businesswoman. And then the coaching side is I'm really passionate about it, and I really enjoy it. So the London Scottish / Harlequins role I'm really enjoying, and the England role I got approached a few months ago, and it's once in a lifetime sort of opportunity to get in the mix and experience what I'm experiencing currently is just invaluable for me as a person, for the business, for my understanding of high performance environments, but also for my coaching, and then taking back some nuggets I learned along the way to my coaching in the Championships.
I think you've summed it up well. It's all about passion and purpose.
Yeah, totally agree.
So we're just going to finish up now with some sort of fan questions that the fans have sent in the last hour or so. And we'll go kind of quick fire on those, if that sounds good. Hello? Yeah.
Hello, you're back.
We're just going to finish up now with some fan questions that the fans have sent in, and then we'll finish up there. So the first question is, well, it's quite an obvious one. What's your predictions for the Rugby World Cup?
Obviously, it's going to be a tough World Cup. South Africa have got a beast of a squad, and they are a tough team to beat, as all the best ones are. They have an all-round game of kicking, can attack with their quick backs. I do think England will do well. I think France are incredible. I think Ireland are doing well. So I think it'll be really tough World Cup. But I think for spectators, it'll be incredible because there's lots of good performing teams, and there'll be a couple of underdogs who come through and do better than people think. But I hope England can go all the way and win. I think it's due. We obviously been to final a lot, and we've got one win. But it'd be great to go that one step further. But I do think, as always, New Zealand, South Africa will be really tough to beat.
Okay, so you're saying New Zealand?
I'm actually saying I think South Africa. Actually,
South Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, you heard it here first from Joe Gray. He believes South Africa's going to win.
England first. If England don't, South Africa.
All right. The next question I've just come up with from the top of my head. If England win, how are you celebrating?
Oh, I do not know. It will be it will be a big one. I can tell you that if they win, it will be incredible. So we'll just have to wait and see. I'm pretty sure it'd be pretty incredible. I was a young lad in 2003, so I was 16. I might be younger, actually, 15. And I remember that. I remember people going down to London. I remember the parades. I remember all the rugby clubs doing the World Cup tour. So it would just be incredible for the sport. And I think there's a time, especially for us in the Premiership currently and in England, Wales and the UK, I think bringing a World Cup back would be huge for the sport currently because it's going through a tough time. So.
And it's close. It's only in Europe. It's in France. It's just across the train.
Yeah. So it'd be incredible if we could do it. And I think it'd be unbelievable for the sport.
The next fan question comes in from Mateos. He would like to know, who is the toughest player you've ever played against?
Oh, it's a good question. I have to say, I only played against him once, I think, but playing with him and seeing what he did to other people as well was Will Skelton is just an absolute beast of a man. So I was lucky enough to play with him a load, so I saw what he could do, but he weighed 150 plus kilograms, 6'6", powerhouse, faster than you think as well. Specially made boots, they're like size 19. He had to get them specially molded and made. But he was just an absolute beast, an unbelievable player when I was at Saracens. So played against him once, but he is a monster, and I'd probably say he's the toughest to try and take down and try and manage on a pitch. He'll destroy them all, be an absolute steam train in the scrum when he's behind the other side or behind you, and then his carrying ability is ridiculous as well.
Fair enough. Spencer Nelson would like to know, you've got to choose your dream front forwards. Greatest of all time. Who are you picking? Your hooker.
I'm a hooker, so I do it with who I've played with as well, because I played with some incredible players. But I'd have to say Tom Smith as a young lad, being Northampton Saints. He was unbelievable, Lucette. Like, not only his scrimmaging ability, he was really good scrimmager, but he'd drop into fly half and do a dummy switch and a miss pass, and you wouldn't expect it. He had his big shin pads on. He spoke really quietly, and he was an unbelievable loose head and an absolute legend. So Tom Smith would be my loose head, and then in terms of tight head, who would I have as my all-time tight head? I'm just thinking. I played with Ewan Murray over the years. I played with obviously Carl Sinclair and lots of people, but probably my favourite, and he's really underrated tight head, but Will Collier is just a penalty machine when it comes to scrums. Like, he just eats up pens, and a man after my own heart that I love a set piece. So we used to call ourselves the Jigsaws. We just sort of slotted in well together and did some work over the years. So I'd say scrimmaging with Collier, I think he is world quality and not had the sort of the career he probably should have at international, but he's an unbelievable player.
And then for the second rows and back rows?
Second row, I would have Will Skelton. He is like the heaviest, strongest man I've ever seen in the scrum. And as I just mentioned, an unbelievable rugby player. As we've all seen, he's gone to La Rochelle, he's carving up. He did it at Sarries. He's just a beast of a man. Then in terms of five, I'd probably go, I'd go probably a little bit off the card, but I'd say George Cruz is just an all-round exceptionally good rugby player. But where he's different to an Itoje or someone, he doesn't have one really standout thing other than his line-out calling. And again, as a line-out operator, he was unbelievable to throw to. He knew a line-out really well and put you in great position. But he actually, playing with him and watching him, did everything to the highest standard, but never really got the plaudits for it. But you don't get that many caps for England and both lines and stuff if you're not unbelievable. But I think he's underrated as well over the years. But he's an unbelievable player. Yeah.
And then back row?
Back row, Chris Robshaw, and he'd be my captain again every day of the week. So he was, an absolute unbelievable player. Top the carries, top the tackles, led by example, unbelievable bloke, workhorse, winning everything fitness wise. So he'd be my 7. In terms of my 6 would be Mo Fasabaloo.
Okay.
The old days, the old era in 2012 time. He was just an absolute freak. He'd snap people in two. And I remember playing Munster. Barley, their hooker, would overthrow basically every throw. He'd land in his hands the tail gunner, and he'd just run over Ogar, and Ogar was losing his mind, screaming at Barley, "Whatever you do, don't overthrow it." Kept overthrowing it. He'd run over top of him, but he came from rugby league, unbelievable player. And then 8, it has to be Nick Easter. So it'll be a full Quinn's back row, but in his prime, I've never seen 8 like it. He could read a game better than anyone. He'd be stood in a position miles wide, and he'd be like, "Work, Minty," and then the ball would come out 3 phases later, and he'd score, and he'd laugh with his deep chuckle, going, "Hey, you need to know where the game is." And he knew the play way before everyone else. So he was incredible.
The final question we ask all the podcast guests is, if there was one player that you would like to see on the podcast, who would it be and why?
It's a good question. I'm always intrigued by he's my idol growing up, but Johnny Wilkinson, whenever I hear him talk, I think he's extremely interesting. I think it's incredible, his sort of mindset on his career. It's totally different to mine. Like, I love my career. I didn't have all the thoughts he did throughout his career, and the panic and anxiety wrapped around it. But I always think it's very interesting to listen to. And I was a huge Johnny Wilkinson fan, obviously that era of winning the World Cup. But even before that, Six Nations stuff, I had Johnny Wilkinson, the perfect 10. I had all them bits, and he was a massive influence for me on my career. I threw at a lamppost for an hour every night because I watched the DVD, and he kicked every day to get the best he could do at it. So he was a huge influence, and I always love hearing his stories and his sort of journey. So yeah, I'd love to see him.
Wilco would be a class guest to have on, that's for sure.
Awesome.
And finally, where can the podcast listeners find you on Instagram, and anything you want to plug?
So on Instagram it's at JoeGray_2. And then in terms of My Masters, my company is just at My Master, and you can see all the products, but we currently have a range of about 10 to 12 now, all the way from ice baths, cold water immersion, to massages, to compression, lots of different things in there. But yeah, or just follow along. I generally try and share as much of my journey as I can. As we've spoke about, I'm spinning a few plates currently, so I try and share it and let people see what I'm to. So.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Joe. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and look forward to catching up soon, I'm sure. Thank you very much, and thank you to the listeners that are listening out there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you next week. Cheers.
Thanks very much.